Thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, where we discuss the latest news, rumors, and games of the NFL and college football. As always, I'm Jeremiah, and we are back again for another action-packed episode for you guys today. And unfortunately, Anthony cannot make it today. He is a little bit under the weather, but that's not going to stop. We got a lot to talk about today. And yesterday, the biggest news to come out of the NFL landscape is that Marshawn Lynch is probably going to make a comeback to the NFL and will play for the Oakland Raiders. And Marshawn Lynch, he's currently retired. He's still technically on a contract with the Seattle Seahawks, so if he were to unretire, the Seahawks would have to either release him or trade him. But an NFL source told ESPN that a deal between Oakland and Lynch will eventually happen. And Marshawn Lynch, he did visit the Oakland Raiders facility yesterday. And, I think I take a couple of things away from this. And one thing's first is that, this tells me how the Raiders value Marshawn Lynch over Adrian Peterson. And, it kind of tells me that it looks like they're going all in on Marshawn Lynch as well. Well, for Marshawn Lynch to come back, it really does say I think he's going to only play for the Raiders. If there's any team that Marshawn Lynch was going to make a comeback with, I think it was going to be Oakland. I really do think so. Because, when the last time we saw Marshawn Lynch was in the Seattle Seahawks uniform, and in his final year, he didn't do so well. He missed a lot of games. He had a really down year. He didn't look like the same beast mode that he was. And I still think that with him not getting the ball, in Super Bowl 49, I think it still really hurt him. I think he took that very personal. I think with him not getting the ball, he was probably thinking in his mind that why didn't the team believe in me to win this game? And you know what? If they would have give Marshawn the ball in that game in Super Bowl 49 against the New England Patriots, they would have won that game. I really truly believe it. I really do. But if the Raiders do add Marshawn Lynch, they add a power back. He is 30 years old. So I still think maybe there's a little bit left in the tank. But the reason why I like Marshawn Lynch going to Oakland is because they have a lot of good depth at the running back position. They have the second best offensive line in the league. I think Marshawn Lynch still has a little bit left in the tank. I think he can score some touchdowns, especially in the red zone. But, I think he might be a little bit slight of an upgrade of Latavius Murray. And I know Murray is a lot younger. I know he's been in that system for a couple years. But, there were times when Latavius Murray really looked slow off the line. And, and that was with the second best offensive line in the league. Now he was going to probably one of the worst offensive lines in the league in Minnesota Vikings. So I don't think he's going to have a lot of success there. But, talking about Marshawn, the Raiders needed to add a running back. I think this is the only weakness they have in this offense. You got the quarterback, you got the receivers, you got a tight end now in Jared Cook. All you needed was a running back. And I really do think that if they weren't going to get Marshawn Lynch, they were going to address it in the draft because, they just weren't interested in Adrian Peterson. They just weren't, even though Peterson did say he was very intrigued by Oakland, but that's probably not going to happen. So, honestly, right now, it's only a matter of time that Marshawn goes to Oakland. He's probably going to play maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years before the team moves to Las Vegas. And who knows, maybe he is that missing piece for the Raiders to get over the hump to make it to the Super Bowl and to possibly take on the Patriots, because that's basically the cream of the crop right now. I think Marshawn could give the Raiders a little bit more to get over the hump and to get go to a deep playoff run. And I think with the Raiders not having a legitimate running back last year, and I know they got Murray, but there was times when he just didn't look like he wasn't the guy. Murray was very inconsistent as a running back. Even though he did show flashes, I still think Marshawn Lynch is a slight upgrade because, he's just an absolute bruiser. And I know he is 30 years old. I know he's up there in age. But if I have the second best offensive line in the entire NFL, and if I have Marshawn Lynch on the 1 yard line with the second best offensive line, there's no doubt in my mind that I would give him the ball in that situation. So I think with Raiders being a legit playoff team, because I do think they will make the playoffs, Marshawn Lynch could be the first, second down back, and then they can add in Jalen Richard and then DeAndre Washington. Those are two guys that are really good complementary backs. So Marshawn Lynch doesn't have to be the 3-down back. He doesn't have to get 20 carries a game because they got enough depth already. So I do like this move for Lynch because, they're going to try to find ways to keep him fresh. And I do think that he is a perfect running back to throw in on goal line and red zone situations. And when you got a quarterback like Derek Carr, or you got offense like the Oakland Raiders have, it's going to be tough to game plan Marshawn Lynch when he gets inside that 20 or inside the 10, maybe even the 1. So I think with Marshawn Lynch possibly making a comeback, I really do think he can help the Raiders. I really do think so. I do think if they can get a legitimate running back that could pretty much run the clock down, I think they have a legit shot to challenge the Patriots. Because, right now the Patriots are still the AFC favorites right now. And when you think about the second best team, there's a huge gap. Right now, you can say teams like like the Houston Texans, but they don't really have a good quarterback. Even you can maybe throw the Colts in there, but they have a terrible defense and a terrible offensive line. You can say the Steelers as a second best team right now, but Le'Veon Bell, he was hurt, and I think if the Pittsburgh Steelers, if they're fully healthy and Le'Veon Bell is healthy, they can no doubt challenge the Patriots. And I think if Le'Veon Bell was not hurt in that AFC Championship game, I think, the Patriots would have been a little bit more challenged. I still think they would have won, but they would have definitely been more challenged in that AFC Championship game. So when you think of the second best team in the AFC, there's a really huge gap with the Patriots, the Steelers, and then, I can put Oakland there as one of the top 3, top 4. It's really a huge gap. And I do think that if adding Marshawn Lynch to the Raiders, I think it can make them a strong number 2 team in the AFC. Because, the Patriots, they just got so many weapons there. They added Brandon Cooks. They almost added Adrian Peterson. That probably would have been a little bit unfair. But who knows? Adrian Peterson is 32 years old, so maybe not really. So a couple of things I take away from Marshawn Lynch possibly making a comeback and going to the Raiders is that, I think he can make the Raiders offense better in the red zone. He can definitely help the Raiders score touchdowns. Marshawn may not even get 1,000 yards for this team, but you know what, though? he may get double-digit touchdowns with this squad. That's the thing that's really important, is getting touchdowns. He may not ever get a 1,000-yard season again, but I'm telling you right now, he can possibly get double-digit touchdowns. So that's something that I take away from this. I do think that, the Raiders could potentially challenge the Patriots, and they're probably they can be the second best team if they use Marshawn Lynch properly. Because, they got a great offensive line. I said it countless times. Great offensive line. Great team all around. It's just that the running back position is probably the only weakness on this team right now. So, with having a big name like Lynch, really could solidify the offense, and especially they can have a chance to score more touchdowns. Because when you're in the red zone, or when you're inside the 5, and when you got guys you got to cover like Crabtree, Amari Cooper, Jared Cook, and you have Derek Carr at quarterback, remember, he can run a little bit. Who are you going to guard? Who are you going to cover? You can't cover all of those guys at once, and that's going to leave more opportunities for Marshawn Lynch. And I really like this, because Marshawn Lynch can score you touchdowns still. Yeah, he may not get 100 yards a game. He may not get 1,000 yards in the season, but honestly, I think right now with the depth that the Raiders have at that position, he doesn't have to. I think Lynch rather win a Super Bowl and help this team win than gain another 1,000-yard season. I really do think so, and I do think that's the reason why Marshawn Lynch wants to make this comeback. He wants one more chance to win the Super Bowl. He wants to win it for his hometown. He can help this team score, and I think that's the reason why he wants to make this comeback. And you know what? I think we need Marshawn Lynch one more year. I would love to see Lynch in the Raiders uniform. He just fits that Raiders mentality. I think he can be really good. I don't think he can be a Pro Bowl player, but like I said, he can score. I think he can score double-digit touchdowns and help this team. I think he can help this team win in the playoffs, because I think this team's going to win the AFC West. They're just they're just that strong of a team. So they're going to win AFC West, but I think once we get to the playoffs, we got to find out more about this team, because, remember, Derek Carr didn't play in the playoffs last year. So we got to find out even more about this team once November and December hits. All right, well, I'm going to take my first break, and I'm going to kind of continue the Seattle Seahawks talk here. It looks like that the rumors for Richard Sherman to be traded looks like that it may be more real than we thought. So I'm going to discuss that when I return to the Going to Meet Concepts Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back to Going to Meet Concepts Football Podcast. And, this offseason we have heard rumors that the Seattle Seahawks were in trade talks with many teams about Richard Sherman. And it looks like that John Snyder, the Seattle Seahawks general manager, told a radio station in Seattle that, the trade rumors of Richard Sherman are real. He confirmed that on Wednesday. And he said that he doesn't know if anything will ever happen. But, 98% of things he's involved with, they don't follow through with. So, with this circulating and with Richard Sherman, or say with the Seahawks and talks with other teams about trading Sherman, it looks like the cornerback himself, he's not really too concerned about it at all. He said he doesn't want to leave the city, but he understands it's a business and organizational philosophies change. So if this does indeed happen, and which is say if Richard Sherman does indeed get traded to another team, I think it's hard for me to see this happen. You just can't trade away a talent like Richard Sherman in his prime right now. And I know he had all the sideline blowups and all that last year, but come on, this is a talented guy. He's only 29 years old, still in the prime of his career. It's been very important to that defense ever since he entered the league. You know, he does have 2 years remaining on his contract. So if it does indeed happen, if a trade does happen, I can probably see it happening next year, more likely than this year. Because, you know, with the 1 year contract left, I can see the Seattle's wanting to get something for him. You know, he is due $11.43 million. It is guaranteed this year, and he's going to make $11 million in 2018. He's never missed a game in his 6 years, and he has made the Pro Bowl 4 years in a row. So you just cannot. I think it's too good of a player to trade. And I've talked about this before in the show. I just think with Richard Sherman potentially getting shipped out of Seattle, I think it might be one of the, I wouldn't say it's the worst thing the organization has done, but I don't think it would be a great thing. I think, and I get that, you know, he's kind of a big personality a little bit. You know, he might be a little bit of a distraction with all the sideline blow-ups, with all the media coverage and all that on that. So I get why he would do this, but he's just way too good of a talent. I think this is one of the cases when the talent outweighs, you know, it outweighs the other things that he has done. Richard Sherman hasn't really done anything. He hasn't. We're acting like Richard Sherman committed a crime. We're acting like, you know, he failed the drug test. We're acting like he done something back, and he hasn't. You know, all the sideline blow-ups were because he was passionate about the game. You know, we've seen Tom Brady blow up on the sideline all the time, and we don't talk about it. Maybe it's because he's a quarterback, or maybe because he's Tom Brady, or he's both. Maybe that's the reason why. But when Richard Sherman does it, the whole media goes crazy. Is it because it's Richard Sherman, he's a cornerback? Maybe it's one or the other, or maybe it's both. So this is one of the things that I think has been blown out of proportion a little bit with the sideline blows. But when you talk about a team possibly trading one of their top guys, I think it's crazy that they would even think about it. And with 2 years remaining on his contract, and if they are really serious about moving Sherman, with 2 years remaining on the contract, they're going to ask for a lot for Sherman because, you know, he's still in his prime, has 2 years on his contract. You can get a lot for Sherman right now. So I understand the thought process of it, but, you know, you got to understand who you're going to get back for him. Because I think there's a lot of teams that would fit Richard Sherman well, and I will discuss what teams I would want him to go if this were indeed true. But are you going to get fair value for Sherman? Maybe the reason why a trade hasn't happened yet is because maybe they're not getting the fairest value that they think. Maybe a lot of teams are lowballing the Seahawks, and maybe the Seahawks just haven't had an offer that they really love. I think that this is going to not happen. I don't think the Seahawks are going to move Sherman. I think they've been talking about this the whole offseason, and I think if it were to happen, it would have happened already. And I said previously before, if a trade does happen, it's going to happen next year when Sherman has 1 year remaining left on his contract. But, there's lots of teams, I think, that really, really could use Richard Sherman. So, I think with Malcolm Butler still on the Patriots, I think that's going to affect a lot of teams potentially getting Sherman. So let's just say if the Patriots do trade Malcolm Butler to the Saints, I can see the Patriots trying to make a move for Sherman. I can see that. Bill Belichick, he's not afraid to take big personalities like Sherman, and he is still in his prime, so he can definitely be a top-tier option right there. I can definitely see New Orleans. I can definitely see the Saints trying to acquire Richard Sherman, especially if they don't get Butler. And remember, the Saints and the Seahawks, they have done a blockbuster trade before. Remember when Jimmy Graham went from the Saints to the Seahawks? They have traded before, so maybe this is a possibility. And then, I can definitely see a team like the Indianapolis Colts do it. They need a lot of help on that defense. They got Vontae Davis there, who is a pretty solid cornerback. But when you potentially pair Vontae Davis with Richard Sherman, that is a good quarterback pairing. That's great. You got the cornerbacks there. You just need to probably build a front seven. I like that pairing. I love that pairing. And I think one team that I would love to see him on, and I've already talked about this team already on the show, and it's not the Seahawks, it is the Oakland Raiders. I think Richard Sherman, if he were to go to another team besides Seattle, I think the Oakland Raiders would be a really good fit for him. I think he has that silver and black look in him. He has a little bit of Raider in him. He definitely would be. It would be a good fit for him. They have a similar scheme, and the Raiders need help in their secondary bad. That is the weakest part of this team, and I did say that the running back position is the weakest on their offense. But as a team, the defense is nowhere to be found. So we didn't talk about the Raiders' defense a whole lot because their offense was so good, and they were scoring a lot of points. And, until Derek Carr got hurt, then that's when, the defense started to have problems. So I think with, Richard Sherman as a potential fit for the Raiders, I think that would be really good for both sides. You already have a defense that has Khalil Mack in, who's looked like he's going to be a franchise player for that team for years to come. So as they continue to build that defense there, I like him as the cornerback in the silver and black. I think he can be a really good fit in Atlanta as well. Atlanta, they have a lot of young talent there in their secondary. But I think Sherman could be an immediate upgrade. And, I think the one weakness from this team last year, and we've seen it at the Super Bowl, was the secondary. Because this front seven can play. I really do think the front seven, the Falcons, can really play. They got guys like Vic Beasley over there. I think the secondary was a little bit exposed a little bit in the Super Bowl, especially when the Patriots made that 28-point comeback. They got exposed a little bit. And I do think that Richard Sherman could help this defense grow, especially that young talent there. He's been in the league for quite some time now, so I do think he can help out this young secondary. And, I think the one team that really does need Richard Sherman right now, he can contribute right away, is the Tennessee Titans. I like the potential match of Tennessee and Richard Sherman. The Titans, they're going to address their defensive needs this draft. The Titans, they need that shutdown corner. They do have 2 first-round picks this year. So, the Titans, they're one of those teams that people are excited about. They're potentially one of those Cinderella teams this year. They're one game away from making the playoffs. Remember that. This team is one game away from winning the AFC South. So, the Tennessee offense, with Marcus Mariota, DeMarco Murray, if they can get some receiver help, this offense can be really good. But the defense is something that has been a question mark last year. And, the defense they haven't had a whole lot of really great defenses last year. They did improve a little bit 2 years ago. They were up and down constantly last year. But I do think that with Richard Sherman potentially going there as a shutdown corner for Tennessee, this defense will get a whole lot better because of Richard Sherman himself. So I would love to see Richard Sherman with the Tennessee Titans. I would love to see Sherman with the Oakland Raiders. I would definitely think he'll be a great fit for the Colts and the Saints. For the Patriots, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't want to see him there, but I think that's a really great fit. I don't think anybody wants to see Sherman in New England because everyone thinks that there will be a super team if that happens. But I can definitely see those as good fits for Richard Sherman. But as of now, he's still a Seahawk, and I think that's where he belongs right now in his career. But, apparently, I guess the Seahawks really don't have, I don't know what they're doing with Sherman over there. The fact that they're having these trade talks is kind of baffling to me. He's a player in his prime. He can still play at a high level. So I can understand them that they're want to get blown away from a deal. But, I don't think teams are technically going to overpay for Sherman right now. I just don't see it happening this year. I think I could see a trade happen next year when he has 1 year remaining on the contract, but with 2 years remaining, teams are going to have to give up a little bit much, and I don't see that happening right now. Right, I'm going to take my last break, and when I get back, I'm going to discuss Jay Cutler. Yes, Jay Cutler's still in the markets, and I think his market is going to be affected now with Tony Romo now walking away from the game. So I'm going to talk about Mr. Cutler when I return to the Going to Mean Concepts Football Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the Going to Mean Concepts Football Podcast. And, as of right now, with Tony Romo walking away from the game to become a CBS sports analyst, he will become the number one. He'll be part of the number one broadcast team there in CBS as part of his football coverage. Well, that leaves the quarterback market a little more clearer now. Well, when we look at the free agent quarterbacks on the market, with the most notable names that come to everyone's mind is Jay Cutler and Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick probably won't be signed this year, and I've talked about him so much on the show. I'm not going to talk about him today, but I do think Jay Cutler, I think it makes it, with Romo now off the market, Jay Cutler becomes the best quarterback available now. I really do think so. And I seriously think the Houston Texans should take a chance on Jay Cutler. Well, before I get into why I think the Texans should sign Jay Cutler, Ian Rappaport did report on NFL Network Wednesday that Cutler's market is really nowhere to be found. He did say that he had a lot of conversations with general managers, head coaches, talking about where the free agent quarterbacks are going to land, and it is unbelievable that Cutler's name rarely ever comes up. So with Romo out of the mix, who was the favorite to go to Houston or Denver, but I think a lot of people had him going to Houston, it looks like Tom Savage now is the man in Houston. Tom Savage is now officially the starting quarterback of the Houston Texans. Well, I shouldn't say officially. He hasn't been named that, but he's definitely on top of the depth chart right now. Tom Savage is on top of a depth chart of an NFL team that is ready to contend right now. And you also have Brandon Whedon as your backup, so there's really not a lot of options behind Savage. So I can see the Texans go in multiple ways here. You can sign Jay Cutler to be your bridge quarterback for the next couple of years. He can definitely contend in the AFC. You might be maybe the third best, fourth best team, but you can definitely win more games with Jay Cutler there, especially with that defense and that talent that he has on offense. Or the Texans could either start Tom Savage and draft a quarterback to compete with Tom Savage. I can definitely see the Texans draft one of the quarterbacks this year, especially in the first round. I can definitely see him take Deshaun Watson. I could definitely see them take Patrick Mahomes. He did play at Texas Tech, so I do think that's something that could happen. I think Mitch Trubisky might go in the top 15 picks. He might go 12 to Cleveland. I think he can go to the Saints at 11. He can definitely go to the Cardinals. So I think that Jay Cutler right now could be the best option for the Houston Texans. And I have talked about Colin Kaepernick possibly going to Houston. But, of course, the more I think about it, there's just way too much politics involved with Kaepernick being on the Texas team. There's way too much politics involved. So that's the reason why I think Kaepernick will not sign there. I think the Texans should look into signing Kaepernick, but they won't. There's too much politics involved there. So that leaves Jay Cutler on the open market for the Texans, the best quarterback option for the Texans right now. They can't waste any time with the rookie quarterback or Tom Savage at all. The Texans can't afford to waste any time right now. They got J.J. Watt returning from back surgery. You got Jadeveon Clowney probably at the last year of his rookie deal. You got Lamar Miller in his prime. You got DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to be a free agent after this season. And you also have the Tennessee Titans emerging. You got the Colts, in there because of Andrew Luck. The Jaguars could be a Cinderella team, but I think it's kind of unlikely this year. The Texans cannot waste any time anymore. Remember, they were one game away from losing the division. That was against the Tennessee Titans. I think the Tennessee Titans, they are a legit wildcard team this year. I think they can win this division because it's so weak. I think if the Colts, if they can make some moves this offseason, I think they can be back in playoff contention. I think if Blake Bortles can play better, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars can make some noise in the division, but I don't think they have enough talent on offense to contend for a division title. They can possibly maybe get a wild card spot. That might be kind of hard, but I can see the Jaguars improving this year. So, with the division potentially getting better, the Texans cannot waste any more time with subpar quarterbacks. You got all that talent on defense. You got talent on offense that may not be there in a few years. You can't waste any more time now with a subpar quarterback play. You can't wait. You can't start Tom Savage. And you can't have another Brock Osweiler-like signing. You can't do that again. And I understand that maybe a rookie quarterback could help, but remember at the end of the day, that's a rookie quarterback. You don't know what that rookie quarterback can play like. Rookie quarterbacks, they can either be really good, like a Dak Prescott, or they can be really bad, kind of like a Jared Goff last year. So the Texans cannot waste any more time, and I think that's why Jay Cutler right now, I think he's good enough to help the Texans contend. I definitely would take Jay Cutler over Tom Savage. I definitely would take him over Brandon Wheaton. I say the Texans should sign Jay Cutler and draft the quarterback. Jay Cutler, he's not going to cost a lot of money. And I know you're probably afraid of drafting, or I should say, you're probably afraid of signing a quarterback because of what happened to Osweiler, but he shouldn't have to overpay for Cutler. He's going to come cheap. Come on now. Can't waste any more time with subpar quarterback play. So, the Texans, they should sign Jay Cutler, draft a quarterback, and, we should be set at that position for at least a couple years. I think Jay Cutler is a perfect bridge quarterback right now. He's not a franchise guy. He's not. But I do think that the Houston Texans have way too much of a team to not contend for a Super Bowl. I think they just can't waste any more time. All these players on this team, all these players on this defense are not going to be around forever. I just said it. J.J. Watt's coming off back surgery. David Clowney may not be there in a couple years. DeAndre Hopkins definitely, I think if the Texans have another subpar season, DeAndre Hopkins is not going to be on the team in 2018. So they can't waste any more time. I say sign Cutler, draft a quarterback. You should be okay for a couple years. That's what I think. I think that's what the Texans should do. They can't waste any more time. They cannot waste any more time. All right, well, that concludes it for me. I'll be back tomorrow. Anthony should be back here as well. We will discuss any type of news that happens over the next 24 hours. I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. My name is Jeremiah. This was the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. You guys have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.